Now, we depend, and I'm sure you've emphasized this so many times, on a very healthy bacterial flora in our gut. And we need them. We love them. They're just critical. However, if there's resident bacteria that aren't our wonderful, familiar, genetically designed to co-create together and be in synergy with gut flora, but rather some different bacteria that shouldn't really be in the gut. And these particular bacteria excrete an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, and that makes it possible to reabsorb that estrogen into the body. So you get these estrogen imbalances going on.
The information provided in this podcast is educational and not intended to diagnose or treat medical conditions.
Are you struggling with bloating, gas, constipation, and fatigue, but don't know what's causing these problems? The Gut Health Reset podcast with Dr. Anne-Marie Barter dives deep into the root causes behind these issues that start in the gut. This podcast will give you the knowledge you need to heal your gut and reset your health.
Dr. Rosensweet, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today, and I am very excited about talking about hormones in the gut and how they are so interlinked to your overall health.
And so good to meet you too as well. A fun thing to do in my world.
Yeah, kind of gets you out and you get to explain to a much wider audience, I think. So I guess without further ado, how are our hormones linked to our gut health?
Well, the primary action of hormones is not directly related to the gut, but there is definitely an interaction. And there's a place, if the gut is not healthy, you can have some hormonal imbalances because of it. And the actual technical way that happens is a woman's ovaries produces 4 ovarian hormones. And one of the many is estrogens. And the estrogens are circulated throughout the body. They go into the cells, they do their thing, they leave the cells, and they're biochemically processed. And they're sent to the liver, and they're degraded as actual potent hormones. And then they're actually linked up with something that makes them soluble, and they pass through the bile into the gut. And in the gut, they're actually conjugated as a glucuronide, principally. Pretty technical. I'm getting there, though. I'm getting to the punchline. And then they're excreted through the stool, and that's the natural process. And ovaries produce new hormones. They go do their thing. They go to the liver. They're conjugated to a glucuronide. They pass out the gut and the stool. They also pass out the urine. Now, we depend, and I'm sure you've emphasized this so many times, on a very healthy bacterial flora in our gut. And we need them. We love them. They're just critical. 3.5 pounds of them, plus or minus. And you can correct me if I got the poundage wrong. And however, if there's resident bacteria that aren't our wonderful, familiar, genetically designed to co-create together and be in synergy with gut flora, but rather some different bacteria that shouldn't really be in the gut. They shouldn't be there. They're fine that they're alive on the planet Earth, but they don't need to be in human intestinal tracts. And these particular bacteria excrete an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. I hope this isn't too deep in the weeds. And what that beta-glucuronidase does is it breaks the cleavage of the estrogen metabolite with the glucuronide. And that makes it possible to reabsorb that estrogen into the body. As a glucuronide, it can't be reabsorbed. The gut is a barrier to it. But if you split up that way that it's being conveyed out, it can be reabsorbed in the gut. So you get these estrogen imbalances going on. I hope that wasn't too technical. for our audience. But the bottom line is have a healthy gut for that and a zillion other reasons. And some women can get into some hormonal challenges because of excessive estrogen, because of that particular function alone.
And so what does that put you at risk for if beta glucuronidase is elevated, for example? So they're reabsorbing the estrogen in the body. Would you mind going into that a little bit?
Well, you're going to have extra estrogen. And that imbalance is not pleasant, and it's not tremendously serious. I think the question that might be in the listener's mind is, well, am I at risk for cancer because of that? And the answer is no. You're going to have a hormonal imbalance. It's not pleasant. You can get PMS, you can have mood changes, you can have all kinds of things go on from the hormonal imbalance. But cancer is a serious diagnosis, and it takes serious health challenges to create it. And those health challenges take place over the course of our lifetime. Causes come down to issues of nutrition, toxicity, too much or too little exercise, and an inappropriate dysfunctional response to the stress of life. The stress is fine, but if you're not skilled at dealing with the stress, you're going to recruit the biology of the stress response, the fight or flee from saber-toothed tigers. That distorts the immune system. That gives you all kinds of problems. So hormones don't cause cancer, even though there is incorrect information about that. Now, worst case, an estrogen imbalance where there's too much estrogen compared to the other hormones can increase breast density. That's not a healthy breast. You can get fibrocystic breast disease even. That's not healthy. And that's a vulnerable breast. But in order to get cancer, you got to have a lot of adversities taking place over the course of your lifetime on every level, including levels we don't usually talk about.
Yeah. I do want to just touch back on something that you quickly said, that hormones do not create cancer. And when you say hormones do not create cancer, are you saying are regular hormones bioidentical hormones or hormone replacement therapy? Would you mind just breaking that down a little bit? Because there's a lot of confusion, I think, even among healthcare practitioners.
Yeah. 0, 0, and 0 to all three of those possibilities. And excuse me, there's that belief out there that's false that hormones can cause cancer because of a crazy misogynistic event that I can hardly understand took place in our medical world. In 2002, there was a big study done on women and women's hormones. And they stopped the study, and the press got a hold of a misunderstood line in that study that said that with one of the products that was being tested, there was reduced risk, Premarin, horse urine-derived estrogen. They catheterize horses, they collect their urine, they dry up that urine, and there's a lot of hormones in there, 50% of which actually are equivalent to a human female, 50% are not. But women treated with Premarin had a reduced risk for breast cancer, for example. But there was this molecule called Prempro. That was part of the study as well. That contained this artificial progestin, which is a problematic molecule to begin with. And what was in the study was there was a 1.26 increased relative risk for breast cancer. And that was followed by the statement, and this is statistically insignificant. And in medicine, as you so well know, the word statistical insignificance means don't draw any conclusions, folks. This is not clear. But the press got a hold of the increased risk statement, blasted it out, And all over the world, women and healthcare providers got frightened. And even though in 2002, there was 18 million American women on horse urine-derived estrogen and Prempro. 40% of all American women in menopause, and it was to great advantage that they were. Well, in my community of those who really are paying attention to it, we went, why in the world would they report that? And the consequence of women stopping their hormones, and the numbers went down to the low millions, maybe 1 or 2 million women. The rest of them got off those hormones. Healthcare providers got frightened to write the prescriptions. And I said, why in the world would this happen? Those women who are coming off those hormones, they're going to have some serious health consequences because hormones are so important for women and men. And they're doing it for false reasons. There's no evidence there. Well, the same study committee that actually did the original study and published it in the Journal of the American Medical Association retracted that study in 2016. And they said after 2017, after 18 years of follow-up, there is no increased risk in breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Mm-hmm. And they showed the reduced risk. Now, this has been elaborated upon by a breast cancer specialist and oncologist. His name is Avram Blooming. The book is called Estrogen Matters. So for those of you who want to dive into the science, and I'm going to give you a soundbite of that science in just a moment, Dr. Blooming's book, Estrogen Matters. And then in chapter 3 of Happy, Healthy Hormones, our book on menopause, and Dr. Anna Marie is going to offer that as a free PDF copy. If you want it, in chapter 3, I explain this in a condensed fashion. Here's the science. Women who are treated with hormones in menopause are at less risk for developing breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who go untreated. Women who are treated with hormones, and basically they're talking about Premarin and Prempro. I myself am not a great fan of horse urine-derived stuff there. Women who are treated with hormones are at less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are untreated. Now, we're all at risk for 1,000 diagnoses. We're all at risk for hundreds of cancers. And as a male, I have an increased relative risk for prostate cancer, and there's reasons for that. They really boil down to special reasons. And women have increased risk for breast cancer and uterine cancer, and there's reasons for that, increased relative risk. But the science is this: women who are treated with hormones are at less risk for developing breast cancer than women who go untreated. Men who are treated with testosterone are at less risk for getting prostate cancer than men who are not receiving testosterone replenishing. The natural hormones don't cause them. The prescribed hormones at midlife don't cause them, doesn't cause cancer. That's the science.
What would you say about some of the studies that say if you have active cancer, progesterone feeds the cancer, etc.? What would you say to those studies?
There's holes in the studies. And again, Dr. Blooming addresses this directly. And there's also that claim for estrogen treatment. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, these days, for decades and decades, when a cancer is analyzed by a pathologist, they're even able to tell whether the cancer has estrogen receptor sites that are active or not, and progesterone receptor sites, and it's reported. Well, the main thing is that in a breast cancer, there's all kinds of cells in there. And the cells within the cancer that you're concerned about are the ones that are primitive. They're undifferentiated. They don't respond to anything. They just grow and go wild. There's no control over them. But in any cancer, there's also cells that are well differentiated. They still have estrogen receptor sites in there because normal breast tissue has estrogen receptor sites in there. They respond to estrogen throughout the menstrual cycle. Now, to look at it and so the cells in a breast cancer that we're concerned about are the undifferentiated ones. So it doesn't matter if a tumor has estrogen receptor positive in there or not. Or another way to look at it is Dr. Blooming, a breast cancer specialist, once again. He's run the only study that I've ever seen of actual what happens when you treat women who have had breast cancer with hormones. Mm-hmm. And he said that as he was doing his study, he started that study in the 80s. There was no knowledge of the estrogen receptor sites. There was no knowledge about progesterone receptor sites. That didn't come till the late 90s. And he said that the conclusions he drew was that women who were treated with hormones who had prior breast cancer and had that breast cancer priorly treated had less incidence of recurrence. So long before there was estrogen receptor sites, and here's the situation. You have a woman who's had breast cancer. She's had the breast cancer properly treated. She's had an increased risk of recurrence of that cancer than a young woman is at getting breast cancer who never had it.
Right.
The relative risk is higher. However, that woman who's had breast cancer and had the breast cancer properly treated is at lessened risk for recurrence if she's treated with hormones than if she received no treatment at all. And the hormones that have been best studied is Premarin and Prempro, less risk of recurrence.
In your experience, do you feel like any particular estrogen is better because we have E1, E2, and E3? Is it having a mix of all of those? What has the science showed us on that?
Well, I do. I do have opinions about that. And I must say that in midlife, women lose their ovarian hormones. And almost any hormone, if done decently by someone who's somewhat knowledgeable, is going to benefit her greatly. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a strong advocate for using the same molecule, bioidentical hormones.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And because they're available, and they've been available since the late 70s. You can, a compounding pharmacist can purchase the same molecule that comes out of a woman's ovary or out of a man's testicle. And you were talking about estrogens. You're saying what is so is that there's not one estrogen. Estrogens is a family. There's actually 3 estrogens. And as my colleague who originated suggesting that we treat with bioidenticals, Dr. Jonathan Wright, he did this in the early 1980s. He said, why do we want to use horse urine? Some of those estrogens are not in human females. And some of them are provocative. Why don't we use the same molecule that's in human females? Well, he suggested that we copy nature. That's very radical.
I like it, though. I just like it, but that was not the thing before.
Right. Why don't we just copy nature? And here's what nature has going on. Young women have the 3 estrogens, and one of them is the most potent one. It's called estradiol. And there's a second one called estrone. It's about 80% as potent as estradiol. And there's a third one that's called estriol, or E3. And it's about 1/8 as potent as estradiol. However, there is more estriol than the sum of the other 2 estrogens. Mm-hmm. And on an average, there's 1.3 times as much estriol as there's the sum of estrone and estradiol. That's how nature's got young women originally designed. possibly there's a reason for that. And Dr. Wright, long before we had the details, said, let's just copy nature. Let's not invent this new thing. Let's not just give estradiol. That's not what a young woman's body does. He was also resting strongly on some research that had been done by a University in Nebraska oncologist, Dr. Henry Lemon. Is this too much detail?
No, it's great, actually.
Okay. In the late 1960s, Dr. Lemon was looking at the urine of women who had breast cancer and women who didn't have breast cancer, because he wondered, was there something unusual about the hormones? And the hormones show up in the urine plus the metabolites, so it's a great way to measure it. And what he found is young women who were healthy had 1.3 times as much on the average of estradiol as they had the sum of estrone and estradiol. Mm-hmm. And women who had breast cancer did not have near as much estradiol as they had the sum of estrone and estradiol. They had a lot less estradiol. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to overemphasize this. Cancer has got very specific causes that take place over the course of a lifetime. Once again, dietary problems, eating pesticides and herbicides that mess up, do a lot of stuff, and other toxicities, and emotional and mental and life issues that aren't handled elegantly with wisdom and skill, and exercise too much. Cancer has a multitude of causes. But this observation was made, and Dr. Wright said, let's just copy nature. This is in the late 60s, early 70s. That study was repeated in about 10 years ago. A laboratory commissioned me to do a new study to see, was this still happening? And what I learned about young women is they had 1.1 times as much estradiol as they had the sum of estrone and estradiol, using the latest technology. Now, here's going on just a little bit further, if it's okay, and you can please interrupt me and stop me at any time. A woman, every single menstrual cycle, does this astounding, almost impossible to grasp, because it's so miraculous, process in which she prepares for pregnancy once a month. And if she gets pregnant, she goes on to be pregnant and prepare for breastfeeding. And if she does not get pregnant, all those preparations disappear. Once a month, she forms this endometrial lining. And if she has a fertilized egg, she keeps that endometrial lining throughout the pregnancy. If she does not get pregnant, she sheds that endometrial lining. That's menstruation. But astoundingly, every single cycle, a young woman prepares for possible breastfeeding. Right there in the beginning of each menstrual cycle, she actually gets increased number of breast glandular cells via a process called cell division or mitosis. A lot of young women can really feel that. Their breasts get fuller as the cycle is progressing. If they do not get pregnant, the breasts get less full. And actually what's going on is those new cells, disappear by a process, funnily enough, called apoptosis. That whole process is inspired by the hormones. During the first part, where there's proliferation, there's new cells, there's endometrial cells, there's breast glandular cells proliferating. That's under the inspiration of an estrogen receptor site called ER alpha, estrogen receptor site alpha, the proliferative phase. If there is no implantation, a whole deproliferation occurs, and that's inspired through the action of estrogen with the estrogen receptor site beta. The principal inspirer of estrogen receptor site alpha is estradiol. The principal inspirer every single menstrual cycle of estrogen receptor site beta, thus deproliferation, is estriol, the most prevalent of all the estrogens. This was not known when Dr. Lemon and Dr. Wright proposed bioidentical hormones. So I say copy nature and favor estradiol, and do have a lot of estradiol there, because we don't want proliferation of cells in a midlife woman. We don't need it. We can get all the benefits that are so crucial for taking hormones in menopause, but we don't need breast glandular cell proliferation. We don't need cell division. Our immune systems, for example, midlife aren't quite as vigorous and amazing as they were when we were younger. So why have cell division that you don't need? Anyway, that's why there's 3 estrogens. That's how they behave, and that's why we think it's very important to copy nature, because we want that deproliferation emphasis.
That was so interesting. When we're building the hormones, because we need certain nutrients to build those hormones from the gut. So we need to have a healthy gut absorbing that to basically have the cofactors to make that. There any nutrients in particular that you think are important for hormone production?
Well, there's the direct and there's the indirect. And in order to produce hormones, and ovarian hormones and testicular hormones are luxuries, they're not going to be given the same priority of production than, let's say, breathing is going to be given, or energy production is going to be given. You need the whole panoply of everything, really, to do a good job, because there's a lot of moving parts. When you look at hormone biochemistry, and you mentioned it already, there's a lot of nutrients that are required because the hormones are made out of them. And there's a lot of cofactors, vitamins and minerals, that make that production possible. And nutrient insufficiencies are epidemic in the standard American diet. If you're not going 100% organic, you can count on not having the nutrients. But that's not the whole story, and you know it better than anyone. You can put the most wonderful food and fully of all nutrients that you need into your mouth, but that does not guarantee that you're going to digest it. You got to have real digestive power in that, from here right on down the whole intestinal tract, to be able to digest it. And I'm really saying things that is your home territory. So pardon me, I don't mean to say it, but you asked me the question, so that's why I'm doing it.
Of course, yep. That's why you're here. That's why you're here.
You have to have a healthy intestinal tract lining, and you have to have a healthy resident population of bacteria. Everything's got to be in place to work. And you start getting imbalances, and you can get into an unhealthy gut lining that's doing things that are not okay. I'll keep it simple like that and leave it to you to really hunker down on it. So, are there specific nutrients? I like to keep it sort of simple in a way. You got to eat organic food these days. Throughout human history, up to about 75 years ago, all food was organic, so you didn't have to think about it. And you got to have enough calories, and you want to spread it out. And then everyone's dietary specific needs are individual, so I don't want to dive into that. There's those who thrive better on less animal products. There's those who won't live unless they get adequate animal products. And these kind of things you can find out about your own individual way. But just eat enough, and eat a variety of foods like your grandmother told you to do. And you're going to do fine. You're going to get enough nutrients. And these days, you probably have to supplement. I do. because the food supply is hurting. If you don't have a garden in your backyard with good soil, you got to have good soil, no less. I'm a gardener, and I've gotten to witness firsthand that, man, the health of the soil is going to really translate into the health of the food. So sorry to get too detailed there, but yeah, that health of that gut, without it, you're not going to produce a lot of things properly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So, I this has been so interesting, and you've just provided so much information. But I want to make sure that the listeners get a chance to. You've got a special offer for the listeners today, and I'd love to know where people can find you if they want to get in touch with you, and in all your details, which we'll also link below.
Well, thank you. You're going to offer a link to our book, Happy Healthy Hormones for Women, and they can download a free PDF copy. And then the greatest breakthrough I've seen in treating women in menopause has occurred because of my team. Because we have so many providers we've trained, my team, Andre and Joshua principally, negotiated with the National Pharmacy for 2 years, and we're about to be able to offer all 4 ovarian hormones for $99 a month total. And that's remarkable because women are paying in the United States on an average of $250. That means some are paying $400, and very few are paying $160. So this is going to increase the access. So $99 a month, and I think my team is set up with your team on how to do that on your website. And then you can go to our website of women, can go to www.menopausemethod.com. And yeah, that's an entryway. That's a gateway. There's a new website we have called Happy Healthy Hormones. It's going to be for males and females. And it's happyhealthyhormones.live. I don't know if it's quite activated yet, but the menopause method will get you there. Menopausemethod.com. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put that link below so that people can have access to your offer and to the book and to the website. But thank you so much for being here today. This was very informative, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of great information out of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.